Bueno, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo ven? Y ahorita seguimos con Mari Postma. Ahí va.
Sorry.
Hello, Daniel.
Así es,
Hola, ¿cómo
estamos
están?
aquí.
Ya estamos en vivo, en directo, transmitiendo a muchos países del mundo. Y estamos aquí con Mari Postma. Gracias, Mari, por acompañarnos.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Mary Postma is Associate Professor in Cognitive Science and Artificial Intelligence at Tilburg University in the Netherlands, where she established several educational programs in the area of data science and artificial intelligence. She obtained her PhD at the Institute of Logic, Language and Computation of the University of Amsterdam. Prior to taking up a position in Tilburg, she worked at IRI Institute in Toulouse, France. The research topics she works on center around modeling of attention and perceptual phenomena with application in education. In 2018, she was awarded a grant examining the use of virtual reality for the purpose of STEAM education. Mari Postma es una profesora asociada de la Universidad de Tilburg en el Departamento de Ciencias Cognitivas e Inteligencia Artificial en Holanda. Y ella ha realizado varios programas en educación en el área de data, ciencias de los datos e inteligencia artificial. Ella obtuvo su doctorado en el Instituto de Lógica, Lenguaje y Computación de la Universidad de Ámsterdam. Antes de que ella fuera profesora asociada en la Universidad de Tilburgo, ella trabajó en un instituto en Toulouse, Francia. Su investigación principal es en el centro de modelaje y atención, todo lo que es el fenómeno porcentual con aplicaciones en educación. En el año 2018, ella obtuvo un premio en realidad virtual para propósitos en educación STEAM. Welcome, Marie, to the ETSAR Colombia and Netherlands 2020.
Thank you, Alexandra, for the introduction, and thanks to the organizers for organizing this very special conference. Is the idea that you're going to be translating what I say, so should I pause between sentences, or should I just keep on talking for the whole time that is allocated?
No, you can talk in all time in English. So.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you for the clarification. So again, thank you to the organizers for organizing this very special conference. I would have preferred myself to be able to visit Colombia in person again, because I really loved my first visit of the country last year. Unfortunately, due to the world events, we have been prevented from meeting physically. I think this is the second best. So I'm very much enjoying this environment, and I thank to the organizers again for coming up with this idea. Let me start with saying something about Tilburg University, the place where I work and where actually other people that you would see today and tomorrow give a lecture, also either work at the moment or they conducted their research there in the past. Tilburg is a city in the south of the Netherlands. The university is specialized in social sciences, but we also have a department of cognitive science and artificial intelligence that is specialized in more technical topics. It has about 70 bachelor and master programs, of which more than half is actually offered in English. So if you know anybody who's considering going to study in the Netherlands, this might be a nice opportunity to find out more about the options at our university. We have about 17,000 to 18,000 students, and actually the number of our students is growing. Of these approximately 17 to 18,000 students, there are about 3,000 international students. So you see that proportionally our university is quite international. We have about 1,500 employees. For Dutch standards, this is actually a relatively small university or mid-sized university, and that means that we are able to collaborate with our colleagues from other departments and also other institutions in the area. One of the collaborations is called Mind Labs, and this is an initiative that was established several years ago with the help of the municipality of Tilburg and the province of North Brabant, where Tilburg is located. in collaboration with the Fontes University of Applied Sciences, also located in the region, and the ROC, which is an institute or an educational organization for vocational education. Now, what's happening in Mind Labs is that we combine our expertise and our forces in order to explore topics in various areas that are all related to the topic of the conference. The main 4 areas are virtual and mixed reality, serious games, natural language technologies, and robotics and avatars. So you see that with these 4 topics, Mind Labs actually covers quite nicely the main focus of what we will be talking about today and tomorrow. Within this initiative, our students and our researchers collaborate with companies in the region and also with organizations nationally in order to tackle a number of important research problems or research questions. And one of these was a topic that I've worked on together with others that I will talk about today. And the main goal or the main question of our research was, does virtual reality improve learning of artificial intelligence concepts? So what we wanted to know was whether if we use virtual reality applications that we would create ourselves, we would actually succeed in teaching our students, and particularly younger students, bachelor students, concepts in artificial intelligence that we know are very difficult for them to grasp intuitively. Now, what I will talk about today, and I think that some slides have been skipped, so whoever is taking care of the slides, can you please go back? Not forward, but back. Yes, thank you. So here you see the 2 concepts that I would like to talk about today. One was principal component analysis, and the other one was convolutional neural nets. For both of these concepts, or actually it's for both, it's the case that it's a cluster of concepts. We know that they're very difficult for bachelor students to understand intuitively, and that is because there is some mathematical background for these concepts that the younger students may have difficulties grasping because they lack the mathematical intuition, and they also have difficulties grasping these concepts without math because they both require having very strong spatial abilities. So we wanted to know whether if we would use virtual reality environments that of course offer the possibility of having 3D representations, whether this would actually help. So let me first say something about the principal component analysis application that we developed. And this was joint work with Jarno Smit and Reinier Zwart, our very talented students at Tilburg University. So can you please go to the next slide? Thank you. So you may know that principal component analysis is a very popular technique in various kinds of research domains. For instance, psychologists very often use principal component analysis to reduce the complexity, the dimensionality of their questionnaires, of their surveys. In machine learning, we use the technique in a similar way in order to decrease the feature space, the number of features that are present in our data, and thereby reduce the complexity of the data or the dimensionality of the data. In order to be able to develop an intuition, can you please go back to the, yeah. You can go to the next slide when I tell you to go to the next slide, okay? Don't move forward, thank you. So we know that for our students it's difficult to develop an intuition for how principal component analysis works, because in order to grasp it, they actually need to be able to perform mental rotations of data points in 3-dimensional space. And they need to extrapolate this intuition into multi-dimensional spaces, which is something that is really challenging, even for people who do have mathematical intuition. To help our students, we developed a dynamic VR application in Unity, and this application included some limited interaction, an explanation of basic concepts that are tied to principal component analysis, rotations of data points, and an explicit presentation of dimensionality reduction in space. And I will show you one snapshot from the application in order to illustrate how these concepts were represented. We spent quite some time on figuring out what the best representation was in virtual reality. We tested out various iterations of the application, and we also involved quite a few experts, statistical experts, in order to tell us how they explain principal component analysis in their classrooms, what they know works and what they know makes it difficult for students. We also consulted quite a few videos that you can find on YouTube where PCA is explained, and the resulting application was really the outcome of a lot of hard work. And again, here I would like to mention the two students who were involved in the project, Jarno Smit and Reinier Smart. In order to test whether the application that was finally created actually has the desired effect, we had 80 students participate in a user study. 40 of these students were explained PCA in a traditional way, using pen and paper explanation. The other 40 students had the VR experience. All of these students were bachelor students who had no prior knowledge of principal component analysis, and other than that, they were matched in terms of gender, the average age, and of course, the general knowledge, because they were all enrolled in our bachelor program. Yes, can you please go to the next slide? So here you see a screenshot from the application. The application actually consisted of several rooms that were all unified in a single environment. But the main room where most of the 3D concepts were explained looked like this. We tried out different renderings of the room, and what you can see a little bit on the top of the screenshot is that there was an open sky for the room. And we actually found out that when we were using traditional Unity rooms in the environment that we created, it felt quite claustrophobic for the test users. So in the end, we decided to open the space. So we opened the academic space, we removed the roof, and we had a nice night sky that actually also gave a very comforting feeling to the participants in the application. That is something that we cannot easily do in our real buildings, so that was definitely an advantage of the virtual environment. Another advantage was that what you would typically as a student see represented in a 2D representation in your book or on the slide as a picture was now represented in 3D. And that actually gave students the possibility to understand how 3 dimensions in principal component analysis are reduced to 2 dimensions, so they're kind of flattened, and perhaps even to a single dimension. They were able to walk around the representation of the 3-dimensional space. They were able to explore the concepts related to this representation, and they also saw dynamically how the space was reduced. When we evaluated the experience, we saw that with the regression analysis, we saw that it actually did not matter that much for the learning outcomes that we measured with a traditional test, whether people received explanation in the virtual reality environment or pen and paper. So the condition they were assigned to did not really have a significant impact. However, their engagement with the learning material did have an impact on their learning outcomes, and we saw that the participants in the virtual reality condition experienced much higher engagement with the learning material than the participants in the pen and paper condition. This makes us expect that not only were the learning outcomes of engaged participants better, we would also expect that the lasting impact of the knowledge that they obtained through an engaged learning situation would have longer-term positive effects compared to participants that experienced less engagement. Okay, so that was the PCA application. I would like to move to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So the next topic that we tackled was more complex. This was actually the topic of convolutional neural nets, which is an active topic for students of artificial intelligence and data science, who at some point need to understand how certain types of deep neural nets work. And these deep neural nets are using the so-called process of convolution. This is something that has been used quite a lot in computer vision. And we know from our students that they have difficulties understanding the process. Now, creating an environment to represent convolutional neural nets in virtual reality was actually quite challenging compared to the principal component analysis. We conducted 3 studies, and in each of these studies, we actually changed the environment quite a bit because we were trying to find a formula for what works in the design. So in the end, we had something like 120 participants who participated in these studies, in these 3 studies, where we tried to work with 2 important concepts in virtual reality. One was gamification. So we wanted to see whether we could improve learning outcomes by adding gamification elements to the application. And the other one was digital storytelling. So whether if we improve the narrative around the use of convolutional neural nets, we would actually see improved learning outcomes. Now, I can say a lot about the 3 studies, where the first one was a kind of a starting point. The second one, we added gamification. And in the third one, we played with digital storytelling, because these were really quite substantial research studies that were conducted in collaboration with, again, our students, Niels Eipelaar and András Adam. But I will, given the time limit that we have today, I will just give you a very brief report of the results. What we saw in these studies was that gamified virtual reality did have a positive effect on overall presence during learning and led to improved learning outcomes, particularly on questions that were testing process understanding. Because as you may know, if you're educators, you may know that there are different things you can ask students to do. You can ask them simple knowledge questions, but you can also ask them questions about how they understand certain concepts or how they understand certain processes. And we saw that the gamified VR experience was particularly supportive of the understanding of processes. For digital storytelling, at least the way that we handled the story in the application, this did not actually lead to improved learning outcomes. So we did not see an effect of that. What you see here on the right in the pictures on the top, you see the room, the virtual reality room that we worked with. This looked like a traditional classroom in one part of the story, because we had the idea that students had to put the whole learning process into context in order to make it less fragmented. And underneath you see a representation of how convolutional neural nets were explained. And again, you see that we gave participants the possibility to actually use the 3D space in VR so that they could walk around and see the convolutional process from different perspectives. Okay, can you please go to the next slide? So to sum up, we have some experiences that we can share and some outcomes that we can share from this process. I think the most important one, at least for myself, but I think also for everyone else who was participating in the project, developing educational applications in virtual reality is a lot of work. And there are no clear guidelines. If you're going to create a program, there are very clear guidelines on how to code. But when you're creating a virtual environment for educational purposes, there are so many design decisions that come into play. And you may know that Unity is not the easiest language to work with. So this is really something that requires a considerable amount of time. We noticed that there are some elements of the design that really have an impact on the participants. The quality of the visuals. If the visuals in VR are not of a high quality, our students reported back that they did not really think that this was a professional application, and they did not really enjoy participating in such a learning experience. So we spent also quite some time on acquiring very high quality visuals and combining them together. we saw that the gamification elements, which can be very simple, just having participants answer some questions throughout about what they're learning and have them collect points, already improves their learning outcomes, not just because they're answering questions, but because they actually do this using this competitive element or this gamification element. And finally, we were really quite persuaded that having a basic narrative or some digital story to be told throughout the application would lead to more engagement and thereby also to better learning outcomes. That was not the case with the narrative we chose, but like, with any other experiments in VR, you never know whether this is due to the concept that you manipulated or whether it's due to how that concept was actually operationalized in the environment itself, because there are just so many choices that you make. So the results in our studies do not necessarily demonstrate that using virtual reality for learning pays off when you're looking at learning outcomes directly. However, if you also measure engagement and presence of the learners, then you do see that there are indirect effects on the learning experience. And this might make the whole endeavor worthwhile. So thank you. Can you please go to the last slide? Yes. So thank you for listening. And now I would like to answer questions, if there are questions.
Thank you, Marie, for your presentation. So interesting. Someone have a question in the audience? Cindy?
Alexa, voy a revisar si hay preguntas en la audiencia. Por ahora, congratulations.
There are one question. There say if this you working is working with the classes of virtual reality.
Yes. Yeah.
And which software you use for this application and research?
Oh, we used different ones. I think most of them, for most of the experiments that we ran, we used Oculus.
Okay. Cindy?
Daniel, ¿hay preguntas en YouTube o en Facebook?
Thank you, Mari. It was an amazing conference. There is no question from our social media, but how long? I have a question. Can I ask? How long did it
Sure,
took
yes.
for you to educate your students so they could start developing in VR?
So the students who worked on this project worked on each of the studies or part of the studies for about 6 months. And they all of them already had some prior coding experience. 2 of them already did some coding in Unity prior to this project, but it was a very small experience in Unity. So I think that all of them were novices in Unity, but not novices in coding. And they had very strong affinity with virtual reality. They were very much interested in learning to use Unity. So I think the motivation helped quite a bit. And then they had some support from our colleagues who are technicians who work with VR. But most of the time they just worked independently, and they worked in our lab, and they asked questions when they had questions, but they worked really independently. So it's not the case that they took a course on Unity. They just looked at videos that are available on the internet on how to make certain, on how to solve certain problems, but they did not participate in a course or, yeah.
Okay, we have another question. Then asks, what motivates you into the work? What you present in the conference?
So I'm a lecturer myself. I'm an educator myself. And I think that my biggest motivation is that I see that we have a lot of talented students who actually have the capacity to study technical matters, but that sometimes they get discouraged because they have the feeling that they don't really intuitively understand certain concepts. And because of that, they may actually interrupt their studies too early, or they may think that they're not the right student for the job. And I think that that's not true. There are concepts that are difficult to get an intuition for, and if we can give students who are otherwise discouraged a feeling of security, or increase their feeling of security by having these VR applications, then I think it's worthwhile, even though it takes a lot of time to create them.
Super. And the next question is, what is the next step of your research in what did you present?
So I'm currently collaborating in part of a bigger project. I'm collaborating with Professor Max Lauwersen, who's actually the founder of Mind Labs, the project that we're working on is a project that's called Space Bus. It's a project on how to bring virtual reality experience to the classrooms of elementary school kids between ages of 10 to 12. And what they're taught in this virtual experience is about the planet. There is a part about STEM, so about technical subjects in the application. But I think that the biggest impact of the VR experience is what's called the overview effect, which is the impression that you have when you look at the planet Earth from the outside, from the universe. And suddenly you see how interconnected everything is and how fragile everything is. So there's also an ecological aspect to the project. And what we're trying to see is, first of all, whether the application as it was developed in collaboration with the Space Bus Foundation and other partners, whether it has the desired learning outcomes, but we also want to see whether students really experience the overview effect in the application and what impact it has on their relation to the earth and to nature, and the idea that we want to educate our kids also to be ambassadors of the earth and protect the earth. So that's the project I'm involved in now. Yeah.
Amazing. Alexandra, before I go, sorry, can we do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 4? So everyone needs to push number 4, okay?
Okay.
So I have to jump into another room. So Marie, you just hit your number 4 numpad.
Okay.
Okay. So we say 1, 2, 3,
1,
4.
2, 4.
Mariana?
I just arrived. The other group told me to come here, so I don't know. No, I don't.
Welcome. You can expect
welcome
with numbers.
Mariana, you are purple.
Yes, for some reason.
Perfect.